we're going to talk about setting up building locations so that you can have various levels in your design and how to use them. And then we'll open up the chat panel so you can type in any questions that you might have about building locations. So if you already do have a question, please make sure you type it in, and I'll be able to get it once we're done the formal part of the presentation. Following the entire broadcast, I'll be sending out a booklet so you can read about everything that we've covered as well. So they'll have nice written examples so you can follow that along as well. So let's get started in talking about building locations. I'm going to go up to the settings pull-down menu, and under the settings pull-down menu, I'm going to click on building locations. This building locations dialog box is the most important dialog box in the software. Anytime you go to insert any type of element, it always looks here first. So when you go to draw a wall or go to insert even a piece of furniture, it gets all of its information about how far off of grade it is and how tall that wall is going to be from this dialog box. So we want to make sure that all of the information that you put in here is as accurate as possible so that when you're drawing, you have everything at the right levels that you want. So we're going to be looking at all of the different columns of information, how they're outlined, and how to add new locations into this dialog box as well. When we're looking at the building locations dialog box, the very first column of information you have here is really just to indicate which is the current location. There'll be a green check mark. So when the green check mark is beside a location, when you exit this dialog box and then look in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, you'll notice that that's the location you're going to start drawing on. So always pay attention before you leave the dialog box, just to ensure that it's checked on the location which you want to start drawing on. There's nothing more frustrating than getting out of here and starting drawing a model, thinking you're on one location and drawing on another. It's quick and easy to use the, duplicate to locations and correct it, but it's, again, time spent. So always look for that green check mark and know that that's the current location you're going to be using. Each of the locations can have a number associated to them as well. The numbers don't have to be 1, 2, 3. They could be 100, 200, 300. It allows you to come in here and type in whatever number you want to give that particular location. The only time we really usefully use that location number is when we're sorting products in our material list. So you could sort them by location, and we can use that location number strategically to sort them in a material list. But other than that, there really isn't a purpose to the number for you to use different numbering systems. Next comes the name of whatever you want to call the location, whether it be foundation or basement or ground floor or first floor. Again, just a name. The only way you're going to see it show up in any kind of documentation is in our material list. So when you're sorting, again, it could be by things on the ground floor versus the foundation. So it's just a name that you're putting in here. The real, I guess you'd say, meat and potatoes of the building locations dialog box comes in the next portions on the columns thereafter. First, starting with the floor level. The floor level is going to be the position from grade of the floor on that location. So I'm just going to grab a pen here and start drawing to illustrate what I mean by the floor locations. So as an example, we can see that the floor level on the ground floor location is 1 foot 5 and a half an inch. That means we have our grade, and then sticking above grade, we have our foundation wall coming up. Sitting on top of the foundation wall, we'll have our sill plate, and this is just going to be a crude drawing here. On top of the sill plate, we're going to have our floor joists, and then on top of that, we're going to have our subfloor. That subfloor, the top of that subfloor, from there all the way to grade is our floor level. That's our 1 foot 5 and a half an inch. We have 6 inches from a top exposed concrete wall, and then we have our sill plate, which is 1.5 inches. And for this 1 foot 5.5 an inch. We've chosen a 2x10 floor joist. So then we have 9.5 inches. And then we have our subfloor there, and we've given it 0.5 of an inch there as well. So all of that, all added up together, is 1 foot 5.5 an inch, taking you from grade all the way up to your floor level. So this floor level column is always referring back to grade. So when we look at the second floor level, you can see that it's 10 foot 4 and 5/8. Again, coming all the way from grade. We know that it's adding up the 1 foot 5.5 an inch that we had coming out of grade to our first floor. Then it needs to take into consideration the wall height on the ground floor as well. So then we have our 8 foot 1 1/8. And then you have to look at the floor materials that are going to go into our second floor. So you're looking at your 9.5 inches again, and your 1/2 an inch, so about 10 inches there in our floor to bring us up to our total of 10 foot 4 and 5/8. That's how we're always going to get our floor levels, by adding it up from grade. The foundation is the same. So when we're looking at grade again, we've got our foundation wall sticking up, coming down, sitting on top of our footer, and then we have our concrete floor slab. The distance from grade down to the top of that floor, if this is an 8 foot wall, is 7 foot 6. So that's the floor level coming down to the slab in our foundation as well. Okay, always going from grade. When you go to add a new location, there's a nice dialog box in there that helps to illustrate that as well. So I'm just going to put my cursor on second floor and hit add a location. And when I go to add a location, it wants to know where I want to make my calculations from. Am I calculating it from the existing locations that are here, or do I want to add it all up, just like I did with the illustration that I put on the screen, from grade? So if I say calculate from existing location and click OK, it brings up a nice looking diagram, not like the sketch I had drawn for you, to help illustrate where it's getting all of these various values from. So the highlighted location when I clicked add a new location was my second floor. So it's calculating all of this from the second floor. If I wanted it from a different location, this is a drop box. You can tell it calculate it from the ground floor instead. So it's saying the top of the wall from grade at that point is 18 foot 5 3/4 of an inch. And then I add in all of my values. Is there a sill plate going from my second floor up to this, I'm going to call it at the top here, third floor. Third floor location. Is there a sill plate? No. Is there structure? Yes. I'll put in our 9.5 inches. My sheathing, I'm just going to put it down as a 1/2 an inch there. What's the head height? So where am I going to hang my windows and doors from the floor of that location? 6'8". From the floor, what is the height of my ceiling? 8 feet. And what is the wall height? 8 foot 1 1/8 of an inch. From there, it calculates for me what the top of that wall from grade would be, 27 feet 4 7/8. So it's looking at the other location, our second floor, adding in the 10 foot 4 5/8 plus the 8 foot 1 1/8 to bring us up to our 18 foot 5 3/4. And then when we add in this floor material, it shows that our floor level value on the third floor location, when it comes to populate this part of the dialog box, that column right there, is going to read 19 foot 3 3/4 of an inch. If I was going to go right up to the top of the wall, there's the 27 feet 4 7/8 by adding up the wall height into there as well. So when I click OK, it then adds in that location for me with all of those values that we saw in that dialog box. If I feel I've made a mistake in some of those calculations and I want to go and look at those values, I can edit that location. And by clicking on the Edit Location button, it'll bring me back in here so I can look at all of the values and how I added them up just to make sure that I calculated them correctly. So if you're wondering where it ever got the values for any of the different locations, you can simply highlight them and hit Edit Location, and it'll take you back into the dialog box where it will show you how it calculated all of the different values. This dialog box, you can see, is different than the last one we were in. The ground floor location, when it was originally set up, instead of coming from an existing location, it came from grade. Meaning, when we hit Add Location here, remember there was two different options. One was Calculate from Existing Location, and we saw that dialog box. If I say Calculate from Grade, that's when we see this dialog box. So when the ground floor location was originally created in my dialog box, it was from calculating from grade. So you can see the different values that are put in there. This floor level value is the only column of information in this dialog box that will change and affect our model. Meaning that if I came through and I had this at 1 foot 5.5 inch, because we were believing at the beginning of the project we were going to be using 2x10s for our floor joists. But as the project evolved and we realized we had to change our floor joist size, and I went to maybe a 2x12, and I had to change this up to 1 foot 7.5 inch for the extra 2 inches of the floor joist that I was changing. My model, if I already had things drawn, would change accordingly. I would see my entire model shift up those 2 inches or shift down. So if you ever need to change the floor level or you've made a mistake and you want to go back and change it, it will correct your model for you and everything will shift up and down for you from this floor level dialog box. The next 3 columns of information, the head height, ceiling height, and wall height information, does not change if you change it in this dialog box for any elements that were inserted previously. It's not interactive in that manner. Any new items that I insert after I make a change will be affected and will take on the new attributes, but anything that was already in the model will not change and be interactive like the floor level dialog box. Why? You'll be putting in windows and walls and doors, all at different heights in your model. You might come through and draw a wall and change that wall so it's only a 4 foot tall knee wall. Or you can edit a wall and have it slope down to match a cathedral ceiling. So with that in mind, coming back into this dialog box and making a global change that you want all walls to be 9 feet, and to update the entire model with that would wipe away any of that customization that you've done. So that's why we've held these values so that if you change them, it only affects new walls that are going to be inserted, not ones that have already been inserted, recognizing that you can make some great customization and you don't want that to be wiped away. There are tools to multiple select walls at the same time so that they can all take on a new property very easily. So that's why we left these 3 not interactive with things that have already been inserted into your model. But we recognize that floor levels change quite a bit as people realize they're changing their structure or made a mistake. So we've left that and made it interactive so it will shift the entire model up and down. The last column of information that you see there are framing options. Every location has separate framing options that can be set to it. So if I look at my foundation framing options, it brings up the location framing options dialog box. In there, this is where I spell out my load-bearing and non-load-bearing span tables. So when I punch a hole through the wall for a door or a window, how is it going to frame around it? These span tables handle that. When I'm looking at how I want to frame my corners, do I want 3 studs at every corner, 2 studs, 1 turned at every corner? It would look at this lookup table as well. And the infill configuration. The infill being the wall, how is it going to fill it in with studs, top plates, and bottom plates? It looks for direction there on how to lay everything out. And then framing rules, when it does apply that framing and putting in that very first stud, does that very first stud happen at the bottom of the wall, or does it happen at the top of the wall? Or if we're looking at horizontal walls, does it happen at the left-hand side of the wall or the right? And by double-clicking here, it'll bring up options of where you want to lay out those studs, that very first one, and then looking at the infill every 16 inches thereafter. If we look at the span tables here, double-clicking on them brings up different span tables that you can choose. Every location from your foundation, ground floor, second floor, third floor can all be looking at a different span table. So if you know that on your ground floor location, you need a beefier header over top of all of your openings compared to your third floor that doesn't have the same load bearing down on it, the weight of those other 2 floors, you can look at a totally different span table if you wanted it to. So that's why we give you the opportunity to right-click in here and add as many span tables as you want to, depending on how you're going to lay out that particular location. The infill configuration is the other option that every floor can change. So here on my foundation location, we can see that for any walls drawn down there that are a stud framed wall, they're going to be 16 inches on center between the studs, and the bottom plate is going to be a pressure treated 2x4. Double clicking on here brings you into the infill library, where you can choose any configuration that you want and how you want to frame that. If I hit cancel here and cancel and look at the ground floor location in comparison, you can see that it's 16 inches on center double top plate, and there's blocking halfway up the wall. I can choose again any different infill that I want to be reflective of how I want to frame walls on that particular location. So every location can have its unique framing information on how you want to frame walls and openings on that particular location, so they can all be different. And so that's why this dialog box is so important. Not only does it separate things to be on different locations, it dictates where they're sitting above or below grade. It dictates the height of windows and doors to be installed as a default. And same with the ceiling height. When I left click to place a ceiling, it'll automatically look up here, look at the ceiling height that I've left, and then put in that ceiling at that particular height. Same with our walls. When it goes to draw a wall, it looks to this dialog box, notes the wall height, and that wall will be put in at that particular height. Again, remember, these 3 columns of information, wall height, ceiling height, and head height, are not interactive for items already inserted. So if I come in and change this wall height to be anything different, it's not going to affect any walls that were previously installed. I want you to take note as well. I'm going to make a change to the wall height here on the ground floor location. I'm going to change it from an 8-foot wall to a 9-foot 1 1/8 wall. When I click outside of that edit box, a dialog box pops up immediately. Notices that I've made the change to the wall height, increased it by a foot, and wants to know if I want to update the floor levels with that current modification. Meaning, if I've changed that wall height to 9-foot 1 1/8, I need to change my floor level on my second floor and my third floor so that they all stack correctly. So if I click yes, notice that these values automatically changed. You have the opportunity to say no if you know there's an error in one of those values, if you just came in and changed them yourselves and realized you were out, you could say no, and it's not going to change anything else in this dialog box. Okay. If you've drawn a location and want to get rid of it, you can hit the delete location button. Notice how I can't hit delete at this point because it is seeing itself as the current location. I can click and change the current location to the ground floor, highlight the word third floor location, and now I can choose delete. But it will not allow you to delete a location that is current. So I hit delete location, and the third floor that I had created now disappears. When you're looking at different levels, then we are drawing, and the specifications for this particular building have a complete basement. So we've went for our foundation at -7'6". Below grade is that floor slab. The walls are 8 feet, so that's where we get that 6 inches of foundation wall above grade. But if you're dealing with a slab on grade situation, so that your slab on your ground floor is only 6 inches above grade, that's exactly the floor level that you're going to type in here. That thickness of floor above grade, if it's sitting directly on grade, would be 6 inches. If it's sitting on a small little stem wall, so if we had a situation where you have a foundation coming up, here's grade, and here's the top of our foundation wall and our slab for our ground floor, and that's 6 inches, then that would be your floor level. That's all you would have to put in there for your ground floor level would be the 6 inches. That's the distance above grade. If grade, and I'll just erase that all off again. So if I do that same drawing here, if grade is sitting down lower, so it's down way down here with grade, and you're exposing a little bit more before you get up into the floor slab there, that's the value. From grade to the top of that floor slab, that's going to be your floor level. Always look at the distance between the floor level in the home and grade, and that's your floor level value that you're going to be sitting there. Draw yourself out a little diagram, just as I'm sketching off to the side, or take advantage of when you're adding new locations to look at the dialog box that's there. And I'll just go to the second floor here and edit that location and all of the values that you see there so that you understand where it's getting all of its information when you're building new locations or having to edit them. Because so much hinges from this dialog box, it's very important that you review all of the values that you set in there and make sure that they make sense for your project, and then start drawing. And again, if you do realize halfway through your project that your floor level is wrong, you can always come back into this dialog box, click on the floor level that has an incorrect value, change it, and again, the model will move up and down accordingly to help correct itself. So you always can go back to that dialog box. Because we ship around the world and building practices are different everywhere, we try to make this dialog box inclusive so that you can build in a number of different manners, whether it's slab on grade, as I've illustrated to you in the little diagram I drew, full basements, or if you're working on a pier system. Always remember that it's just the floor level is from grade to the floor that you're going to walk in on. What is that value? And that's the floor level. What I'd like to do now is open up our chat panel with any questions that you might have about floor levels, ceiling heights, head heights, wall heights, any of the options that I've outlined for you today in the webinar. We can answer those live here during our webcast time together. In the GoToMeeting console that you have on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a section there where you can type in questions. So I invite you now to type in any questions that you might have about building locations, and I'll be able to answer those for you. And again, following the entire presentation, I am going to email you out a booklet so that you'll see the diagrams, see the values that we've typed in, and have a good understanding where everything and all of the different numbers are taken from to get these various values that you see in this dialog box. So I'm just going to slip over now to go to Meetings Console to go into our question part and look at your individual questions. Okay, everybody, no one has posted a question yet. So that means that I either explained that so well that you don't have any questions, or it's a little bit beyond. If that's the case, please don't hesitate to type in a question and get me to clarify and go over something again, because I really want everyone to have a good understanding of this dialog box. So don't ever hesitate to ask a question. And we've got one going through. Oh, and it was just thank you. It was just a thank you. But again, and I'm glad that clarified that for you and understanding the building locations. But if you do have a question, make sure you ask it so that when we all leave from here, we can make sure that we all understand building locations very well. So if you do have a question, go to Meeting Console where you see the questions area. Make sure you type them in there so that I can answer those for you. I'll keep this dialog box and our session open for another moment. So if someone's typing in a question, now is your opportunity. But if we don't have any questions in the next minute or so, we'll end off the broadcast and I'll send you out the booklet. So again, if you do have a question, always make sure you take advantage of this question and answer time during our weekly webinars. It's a great way to get some advice on how you would type in certain information that we're portraying in the webinar. So today, if you have any question about building locations, any height values, make sure you type those in. And it doesn't look like anyone has any questions. So I'm very thankful that everybody understands this dialog box. If you're, after reading the booklet that I'm going to send you, if you do have any further questions, don't hesitate to contact our technical support center. They're open from 8:30 till 5 Eastern time to answer your questions. So give them a call, send them an email, send them your model, and ask for their advice on how to finish a project. They're more than happy to answer your technical questions. So I do have one question coming in before I close out there. Perfect. Offset foundation from house, i.e. manufactured home 32 inches above grade, and put the garage on grade. Okay, so when you're doing that, so they're saying that the house itself is going to be 32 inches above grade. So that means this ground floor, floor level would be 32 inches above grade. And then there's a garage being put in on grade. Where would the locations be for that? They could be on separate locations if they're not attached. So if it's a separate house and then the garage is a totally separate structure, you could put them on two separate locations so that there would be a ground floor location for the home, the manufactured house, and the floor level here would be 32 inches. And then you'd have another location called, and I'll just type it in here, garage, and its floor level would be 6 inches. So that when you're drawing that garage, it's at the right location value, and the ground floor of the manufactured house is on its own location and it's got the right floor level. So they'll put them in when you draw the walls on those locations at the correct height. Now, I said if they were separated. If the garage walls attach into the ground floor walls, you're going to want to put them on the same location. Otherwise, they can't show at the same time. So I would put in my ground floor level, the 1.5 inch, draw my house, and then draw my garage walls, and then make sure that I'm elevating those down by the difference in height. So if my garage walls are sitting only 6 inches above grade, and I'm drawing them 1.5 inch above grade, that means I'm going to have to elevate them down 11 inches, but I'd want them on the same location. Let me illustrate that to you. So I'm just going to click OK. I've got my garage here at 6 inches, a ground floor at 1 foot 5.5. So I'm just going to draw a simple house. And there's a screen delay. I'm going to go back into that dialog box, and people have raised their hand to say that they couldn't see that value that I put in. I just changed a location and called it garage, and I gave it a floor level of 6 inches. My ground floor is still sitting up at 1 foot 5.5 inches. Okay, that was a change that I made here in this dialog box. So now I'm drawing on the ground floor location, and I'm just going to draw a house. So it is sitting 1 foot 5.5 inches off of grade. I'm going to draw a garage beside it here, and I'm going to keep it on the same location. Okay, and then I'm going to hit finish, go to my garage location, and I'm going to draw a garage on this separate garage location on the opposite side. So we can see the values there. I'm just going to put in a garage door just to illustrate something else to you at the same time. So here's a garage door. Go back to my ground floor location. These walls here are part of my garage, and I only want them to be 6 inches off of grade. And right now, the walls themselves are sitting 1 foot 5.5 inches above grade. So that means that I have to take these walls down 11.5 inches to get them 6 inches above grade. So I'm going to select 1, hold down my shift key, select 2, hold down my shift key, select 3. All 3 walls selected, I right click and I choose elevate. And I'm taking them down minus 11.5 inches. Hit apply and OK. So these walls are now sitting down lower. So if I look in a 3D view, a perspective view, you can see the difference there. If I walk up close here, of these walls in my main floor sitting above grade, 1.5 inches, and these ones sitting right down at grade. They're attached. So in a 2D floor plan view, I can see the attachment. My garage location has this garage drawn separately. And when I go back out to my 3D view, I can see it drawn separately here. Okay? Now, floor level on my foundation location, my garage location, sorry, if I go up to settings, building locations, it says 6 inches above grade. When we put a door in, we put the door at the bottom of that floor level. So right now it's sitting 6 inches above grade. If I wanted that door to go right down to grade, right click, elevate, -6, my floor level, hit apply, and OK. And now the door is sitting right down flush with grade as well. If I wanted to show that this garage actually attached into the house and I brought them over to the walls on that location and got rid of this wall right here, see how they don't attach? They have nothing to attach to. Those walls are on a different location. You won't see them attaching like you do on our ground floor with those walls. So that if they attach, put them on the same location and just elevate down. If they don't attach, like we had previously with this garage, leave them on a total separate location. I hope that answers and illustrates that for you so that you can understand the 2 different location types. Okay, I'll just go back and check for question. And there isn't any further follow-up questions to that, but I will hold the line for another moment, just in case there's a follow-up question to that, or if someone has a different question after seeing how that was illustrated, and we can answer those questions for you. So again, 1 more minute, and if there aren't any questions, we will end off the webinar for everyone, and hopefully that that answers everyone's questions. And then the follow-up book, I hope it illustrates everything nicely for you too. So if you're the type of learner, such as myself, that likes to read things and try them out and practice, the booklet that I send you will give you the opportunity to do that. And I hope the webinar, for those that like to learn by seeing someone doing something, I hope that helps you understand locations as well. Okay, that looks like there's no further questions today. So I thank you for joining us today for the webinar. I know it's taking time out of your busy schedules to help you learn, and I hope that we accomplished that for you today. And I look forward to seeing you in next week's class as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic week. Bye-bye.